Good morning. Good morning. It is so good to see all of you coming in this morning to hear taking care of business, basic parliamentary procedures. As we get ready to get started this morning, if you can go to there should be three dots or in your picture where you can change your name to show the diocese that you're from, or you can put it in the chat what diocese that you are representing. That would be very helpful for us. That is wonderful. We have people from everywhere. That is fantastic. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Make sure you just put in your diocese. That would be wonderful. And you will stay muted this morning. And as we go through this presentation, when there's a question, you can either put the question in your chat or you can raise your hand and I will recognize your hand for any questions as we go through this process, this workshop this morning. Okay, we are going to get ready. I just want to say one thing about our speaker this morning. Today, we have with us Cherise Story. Cherise is a professional registered parliamentarian and active member of the National Association of Parliamentarians. She is currently serving as the first vice president of the Texas State Association of Parliamentarians and was appointed coordinator for the NAP Leadership Conference in both 2024 and 2025. So as we go through this workshop this morning, if you have any questions or any comments or any ideas that you have of Cherise, we will, before the end of this, allow time for question and answering. And more than likely, we will have this again because there are so many concerns about parliamentarians, bylaws, and all of that. And the National ECW Board want to make sure that we try to answer as many questions as we can. And now I'm going to, those who just can't come in, once again, if you can put in the diocese that you are from, we will appreciate that. And now I'm going to give it to Cherise in taking care of business, basic parliamentarian procedures.
Well, good morning, afternoon. It's 12:01, everyone. So let me start sharing my screen and we will get started. Slideshow, 1 second from the beginning. Now, why does it not want to do exactly right now, just because I want it to? Here we go. All right, taking care of business, a basic parliamentary procedure that I am very happy to present to the Episcopal Church Women's virtual event series. So our objectives for today are to understand why we use Robert's Rules of Order, to define the roles, rights, and privileges, demonstrate the proper form for making a motion, review rules of debate and decorum, and to examine some common misunderstandings. So we're going to review information about parliamentary procedure so that you can have effective and efficient meetings. So let's start by looking at some common misunderstandings of parliamentary procedure. So may I have a volunteer? We're going to be a little interactive as we can. May I have a volunteer to read this first common misunderstanding on the second? Just have to read what's on the screen, please. Anybody? Any takers?
The seconder agrees with the motion.
And what do you think? Is that true or false? You can place it in the chat, or we can have a brave soul to raise their hand and volunteer for that answer.
That is false.
And
It does not have to agree with the motion in order to make it. It's just beginning the discussion.
And that is exactly right. A second merely implies that the seconder agrees that the motion should come before the meeting, not necessarily that she or he is in favor of that motion. The seconder just wants to be sure that that item is dealt with. And sometimes people strategically put second a motion so that that issue can be dealt with and put to rest once and forever, hopefully. So, our second common misunderstanding on the minutes. May I have a volunteer to read that?
I can read for you.
Thank you.
Common misunderstanding number 2, minutes. Minutes should A, record what members say, B, record actions taken at a meeting, C, record the name of the seconder, D, all of the above.
So you can put those answers in the chat, or we can have another brave soul who wants to answer. Is anything showing up in the chat yet, Gloria?
Yeah, we have D.
Okay, so the answer according to Roberts is B. The minutes should contain mainly a record of what was done at a meeting, the actions, not what was said. Minutes aren't a transcript. And so what do we mean by actions? That includes things like the exact wording of motions that have been made and their disposition, or what's in the teller's report, or the results of a counted vote. So now here's a related question. Should the name of the seconder be included in the minutes? Yes or no? Just shout it out.
No.
No.
Yes.
And so we frequently get yes and no on that, but according to Roberts, one of the many noteworthy things is that the name of the seconder should not be entered in the minutes unless ordered to do so by the assembly, which can be done by a majority vote that will direct the inclusion of any specific items in the minutes. So, common misunderstanding number 3, suspend the rules if specifically related to bylaws. Any reader here?
The bylaws can be suspended during a meeting.
So, true or false? What do you think? Put it in the chat or someone can shout out. I'm good.
False.
False.
And the answer is false. Rules contained in the bylaws or a constitution cannot be suspended. But there are exceptions. No matter how large a vote may be in favor of doing so, or how inconvenient you think that rule is, unless you have a particular rule and your bylaws says in the rule that it can be suspended, your bylaws have to say that for that particular provision, then you can, but most do not. So Common misunderstanding number 4 on friendly amendment. I know you've heard of a friendly amendment, or you hear people say they want to do it. Reader, please.
Can the maker of a motion accept a friendly amendment after the motion is stated by the president?
Oh, thank you, President Boatner. Is that yes or no? Anybody, yes or no? Anything in the chat, Gloria?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, so let me just go on.
I have a no.
The answer is no. Use of a friendly amendment depends on timing. It can only be offered in the short interval after the maker makes the motion and before the presiding officer states the motion. And by stating the motion, we mean those words you've heard, it's moved and seconded. If the motion has not been stated by the presiding officer, it still belongs to the maker, who can either accept or reject that friendly amendment. But if it has been stated, then it belongs to the assembly, and you have to go through the amendments process to change that motion. So this is our final common misunderstanding before we get into other information. So can I have a reader for this one?
An agenda can be adopted with flexibility.
And what do you think? Can you adopt that agenda with flexibility? Yes, true or false? Gloria, we got anything in the chat?
We haven't got, they're thinking. They're thinking.
Okay, well, I'm going to just move on. False. Adopting an agenda with flexibility is not in Robert's Rules of Order. However, you may have heard it because it is a parliamentary procedure in the American Institute of Parliamentarians, which is the AIP. But the National Episcopal Church women use Robert's Rules of Order as their parliamentary authority. So an agenda cannot be adopted with flexibility under Roberts. If you want to change an agenda after it has been adopted, then you're going to have a motion to change it, which is usually adopted by unanimous consent, which we're going to talk about later. Or you have to go through the formal 6 steps of making a motion to amend something that was previously adopted. So thank you. So for parliamentary, thank you all the volunteers who read, but for parliamentary procedures, this is my Bible, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 12th edition. It has everything conceivable for taking care of business effectively during the time that you are giving to the National Episcopal Church Board or to any of your committee meetings or diocese meetings. The In Brief book, the one on the right-hand side in the yellow, is the concise introductory version that is a very readable 213 pages that gives you your fundamentals versus the full edition on the left-hand side, which is 714 pages. So why do we use Robert's Rules of Order? We want to take care of business by having orderly and effective meetings. We want to treat all members fairly and with civility, and we want to have a process for thoughtful decision-making in a democratic process. So now, what other documents do the Episcopal Church women use to take care of business? So I have 3 items here. Can you tell me the order of the governing documents for the Episcopal Church women? And here we're not going to talk about the federal, state, or local laws or the corporate charter, which have a higher level of authority. And of course, we're not going to talk about the Constitution and canons of the Episcopal Church, which, has oversight. We're going to focus on those 3 items that are frequently used. So what order do you think they're in? Can anyone tell me what number 1, number 2, and number 3 are?
I think number 1 is the bylaws. Number 2 would be the policies and procedures. And number 3 would be Roberts.
And there you have it. Thank you. Everything you do is governed by your bylaws. Then you have your policies and procedures, which covers your details and processes. And then, and these are documents that are voted on by your body and must be followed. And any changes to them is made through amendments or revision of the entire document. And if something is not in one of your government documents, then that's when Robert's Rules of Order, your parliamentary authority, applies. So let me take a moment here and mention two other things that were not there. Standing rules and customs. Standing rules refer to the administrative rules, those things that you do that are not parliamentary in nature, like what time a meeting will start, or you need to go to the mic to be recognized. And the custom refers to those things that you are doing the same way you have always done them. They aren't written down, but as long as that custom does not conflict with your governing documents, it's okay to continue. But once a member points out that there is a conflict with your governing document by making a point of order, Robert says that that custom falls to the floor. So case in point, during nominations for officers, and you hear people repeat the nominees' names 3 times, or they're asked, are there any further nominations from the floor 3 times? That is a custom that is not in Robert's Rules of Order. So Roberts has several underlying principles that govern what a deliberative assembly does, like a gathering of the board or a gathering of a meeting where you're going to take care of business, make some decisions in a democratic process. And those underlying principles are to protect the rights of the majority of the membership, the rights of the minority, especially if you have a strong minority, which we think of as generally a third of your members. The rights of individual members need to be protected. And we need to protect the rights and be concerned of those who are not in attendance, the absentees. For instance, we can't change our bylaws or vote on a budget without members knowing. And finally, the principles of parliamentary law need to protect the rights of all of these together. The rights of the group supersedes the rights of any member. So a deliberative assembly, like the National Episcopal Church women, adopt a parliamentary authority for guidance. And everyone has a role. In taking care of your organization's business, there is the president who presides over the meetings, the members who make the decisions for the assembly, and the parliamentarian who advises the president on parliamentary matters. So let's take a look at these roles individually. Now, the president is the presiding officer, or we call her the chair in Roberts, but a lot of us older people do not like to call a person by the name of an inanimate object. But that chair or your presiding officer could be in a meeting, could be in a committee meeting. And so we are familiar with the responsibilities of the president for the most part. The president is going to be calling the meeting to order at the appointed time and ascertaining whether there's a quorum. And by quorum, we're talking about the minimum number of members who must be present to validly transact business. The presiding officer makes sure that the agenda is adopted and followed, recognizes members who are entitled to the floor, and is responsible for stating and putting to a vote any legitimate motions. She protects the assembly from frivolous motions by refusing to recognize them, and Roberts calls those dilatory motions, where someone may be attempting to obstruct the meeting or thwart the will of the authority of the assembly. And then the president also enforces your rules of debate, like how many times a member can speak and for how long. And we're going to talk about debate rules shortly. And the president also decides or responds to your parliamentary inquiries. But above all, the president must remain impartial in presiding over the business of the organization. So why do you think that's important that the president is impartial?
Lisa, did I see your hand?
No takers? Well, we'll just move on. So let's see what Roberts says that impartiality looks like. Though the president, as an individual member of the organization, has the same rights as all of your other members, impartiality precludes them from exercising the right to debate while presiding. And this is so that members have a sense of fairness. And so normally your presiding officer, your president, your chair should have nothing to say on the merits of a motion. However, there are times when your president has some information, and should be extremely rare, but has information that is a crucial factor relating to the question at hand, the motion that's being voted on, that outweighs the duty to preside. So in those cases, the presiding officer to speak must relinquish the chair for the duration of that motion being discussed and so she would relinquish that to the highest ranking vice president who has not spoken, because we're talking impartiality here, and who has no desire to speak. And the presiding officer can return to duty once that particular motion is disposed of. The result has been announced and you're moving on to the next item of business. But there is an exception. In small boards, those with less than 12 members, and in your committee meetings, the presiding officer may participate in debate. So, have you heard? I thought the president was not supposed to vote. True or false? The president cannot vote. Put it in the chat or somebody say something. How many of you think it's true? And how many of you think it's false?
I see a false in the chat.
False.
I see a false again, 3 false in the chat.
Wonderful, because the answer is false. Unless the vote is by ballot, that is a secret vote, the president protects her impartiality by exercising her right to vote only when her vote will affect the outcome. She can either vote and change the result or abstain and leave it as it is. Her vote can make a tie or break a tie. As an example, on a motion that requires a majority vote, if the result is that is a tie without the president's vote, she can vote in the affirmative and that motion will be adopted because she has broken the tie. But if she abstains, that tie remains and that motion is lost. But in the case where there is one more vote in the affirmative, that motion has been adopted if the president abstains. But if she votes in the negative, she has now created a tie and the motion is lost. So the president can make a tie or break a tie to affect the outcome if she desires to do so. So members are entitled to full participation in your organization's proceedings. A member has the right to attend meetings, to make motions, to speak in debate, and has the right to vote. Also, the right not to vote. That's an abstention. You can't compel a member to vote. So everything we do in a meeting is encapsulated in these 4 rights and privileges. So now the officer whose role is not always clearly understood is that of the parliamentarian. She is a consultant who advises the president and other officers on matters of parliamentary procedure. The parliamentarian's role is purely advisory and consultative, since the parliamentary law gives the president the right to make the rulings and the right to respond to any parliamentary inquiries. The president also knows in advance the business that's going to come before the assembly because she sets the agenda. So she should confer with the parliamentarian before the meeting so they can anticipate any problems that may come up or motions that they need to be sure are handled appropriately that they know are coming up. And only in the most involved situations should the parliamentarian actually be asked to speak to the assembly. And so the parliamentarian should sit next to the president so that she can inconspicuously give her some comments or notes that maybe there's some error in the proceeding that might affect the substantive rights of a member and or anything that would do harm. And so the president can handle that and move forward without and make whatever final ruling that needs to be made. And the president has the right to accept the advice or reject the advice. But if you reject it and disregard it too often, you're probably going to get a new parliamentarian. And like the president, the parliamentarian maintains a position of impartiality. And so the parliamentarian does not make motions, the parliamentarian does not participate in debate. But unlike the president, the parliamentarian cannot temporarily relinquish their role. And they vote. They can vote if it's a ballot vote, a secret vote, but they do not speak. So now let's get to the nitty gritty of what most people think about when they think about parliamentary procedure. They think about a motion and making motions. So what is a motion? What is the purpose of a motion? So a motion is a formal proposal by a member that the assembly take action. So a member brings business before the assembly by making a motion. It is the initiation of your thoughtful decision-making process. And so motions may also come from recommendations or proposed actions that are in your committee reports. But regardless of how they originate, there are 6 steps that you follow. And here are those 6 steps. And they begin with someone seeking recognition so they can speak by saying, Madam President or Madam Chair. And after they have obtained the floor, then they will make the motion. Step 1 is making the motion by saying, I move that, or I move to. I move that we buy a new computer. Step 2 is the motion is seconded by a different member, by someone saying, I second that motion, or they just shout out second. They don't have to obtain the floor. And that means, as we said earlier, that there is at least one other person in the assembly that believes the matter should come before the assembly to be addressed. But if it's coming from a committee, it doesn't require a second because there's already been more than one person who discussed it in the committee to bring it forward to the assembly, unless it was a committee of one. If it was a committee of one, then it does require a second. And then step 3 are those words that we have heard. It is moved and seconded. And note, I said it is moved and seconded. Now you've heard it has been properly moved and seconded, and that's okay. But Robert says it is moved and seconded. And if you're taking the membership exam, you need to say it is moved and seconded and not use those other words. But we will not crucify anybody in any meeting if they say it has been moved and properly seconded. So now that the motion is pending before the floor, the assembly gets to consider that motion. And that's when you get into step 4, debate. And we're going to talk about debate rules in a few minutes. Then step 5, when it appears that debate has closed, the chair will ask, are you ready for the question? Or is there any further debate? Now, if no one rises to or seeks recognition for any further debate, then the chair will put the question to a vote. And I used to say, what do you mean put the question? I didn't hear anybody ask a question. Well, the question, I learned, is the motion. So you will hear the formal word, are you ready for the question? Meaning, are you ready for the motion to be voted on? Or is there any further debate? And then you'll hear those other familiar words when the motion is put or when the question is put. You hear all those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Notice I said no, not nay. Roberts uses the word no. And the easy way to remember is horses neigh, people say no. So, should you ask for abstentions? Anybody? Should you ask for abstentions? Anybody say yes? Anybody say no? You seeing anything, Gloria?
No, they're still thinking.
They're still thinking?
I got a note. There's
You
a
got a
note.
note? Great. So, no, you should not ask for abstentions. To abstain means not to vote at all, and you cannot be compelled to vote. And the outcome of the vote is based upon those members who cast a vote. Abstentions are ignored. And the final step, number 6, is that the chair announces the vote result. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted to buy that new computer. Or the noes have it, and the motion is lost. And then you immediately move to the next item of business. And oftentimes the words are, and the next item of business is. So here's a screenshot that a lot of people like to take, that you've got your 6 steps right there. Okay. So moving right along, we're going to do a little practice script on how you handle, because sometimes it just flows better if you practice a little bit. So I need 4 volunteers. And with the volunteer, all you have to do is read the script. You don't have to try to memorize it and come up with it on your own. I need 4 volunteers, a chair, member A, member B, and member C. Gloria, are we getting any volunteers? Somebody?
Yeah, we have Lisa. I see Lisa is one. Make sure you unmute yourself if you're going to volunteer.
So is Lisa our chair? Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I can volunteer to be member A.
Wonderful.
I'll
Member
be,
B.
I'll be B.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll be C.
All righty. So this is a 2-page script, so it'll go to the next screen. So we're going to get started with member A.
Madam President,
Member A is recognized.
I move to purchase a new computer for the treasurer with funds coming from the technology line item.
Second,
It is moved and second to purchase a new computer for the treasurer with funds coming from the technology line item. Are you ready for the question?
Madam President,
Member C is recognized.
as a previous treasurer, I support this motion. The treasurer's computer is 5 years old and slow.
Is there any further debate? The question is to purchase a new computer for the treasurer with funds coming from the technology line item. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion to purchase a new computer for the treasurer with funds coming from the technology line item is adopted. The next item of business is,
Or she would say the noes have it and the motion is lost. The next item of business is. So did you all see those? Well, first of all, thank you, volunteers. And if we were in person, I'd probably have some candy or something for you. But did you recognize those 6 steps? So notice the final statement after announcing the vote is to move on to the next item of business, because this motion is disposed of. So a few other things to consider when you're making motions. They should be concise and unambiguous so people know what they're voting on. And you shouldn't use so moved. So you may have heard a committee report, or you may have heard the presiding officer may be saying, we need to consider something or another, and then someone just yells, so moved. Well, what did you just move? The assembly needs to understand exactly, in a concise and unambiguous way, what the motion is. And the other thing is that you don't interrupt the voting process with additional debate or comments. Once the voting has started, The question has been put and the voting is started. Debate is over. You can't go in the middle of the vote and say, oh, I forgot this. I need to say thus and such and this and so. So there are exceptions. So, for instance, if you're doing a ballot vote and the tellers have gone off to the side and they're counting votes, you can continue on with the business. Or during COVID, you know, a lot of there might have been electronic voting with a window open, and so the window was open for people to vote, and then people were also voting and continuing on with the business. But these would be the only two cases where that are not exactly interrupting the vote. So now, in cases where you have routine business where there is no opposition expected, you can save time by the procedure called unanimous consent. And you may have formerly heard it called general consent. And unanimous consent allows for a motion to be adopted or some action to be taken without going through those 6 steps that we just talked about. And so to obtain unanimous consent, the chair simply says, is there any objection to buying a new computer or adopting the agenda? That's a routine item that people use unanimous consent on quite a bit. And if you, after you ask if there's any objection, the presiding officer surveys the room and looks around, and if nobody says they object, then she'll state, without objection, the motion is adopted. Or since there is no objection, the motion is adopted. Or hearing none, the motion is adopted the agenda is adopted. So unanimous consent does not necessarily mean or imply that everybody in the room was in favor of the proposed action, just nobody felt it was necessary to object. But if they did object, and that meaning they opposed using a unanimous consent, it doesn't necessarily mean that they oppose the motion or the action. They might just want to see a formal vote taken. And so if the presiding officer uses unanimous consent, the motion is adopted and you move forward unless there's an objection.
Cherise,
So,
you have a raised hand here to bring in.
yes.
Yes, I have a question about the adoption of the agenda. I know that the agenda is adopted by a formal motion, but a lot of times some assemblies feel that minutes must also call for a motion. And could you clarify that a little bit?
Okay. So we're going to get to minutes in a little bit later, but let me just say to answer your question, minutes, the agenda can be adopted by unanimous consent is a very frequently used method of doing that, and you don't have to go through the formal motion. Now, minutes, you ask if the minutes should be corrected. You do not vote to adopt or approve the minutes. You ask if there are any corrections to your minutes. And that would be your difference.
Thank you.
Okay, so now, oh, I skipped ahead, but that's okay. So, as a practice, but I'm just going to go on and read it. So if the president, to use unanimous consent, the president may say something like, is there any objection to the member? So here's a situation where we have a standing rule that you get to speak for 2 minutes. And so somebody wants to speak for more than 2 minutes. So they have to ask for permission for that. And so you can do, is there any objection for the member's time being extended 2 minutes? Look around. Hearing none, the member's time is extended 2 minutes. If there is an objection, you have to go through those 6 steps. And then the secretary records in the minutes that the motion was passed by unanimous consent. So, how do you take a vote? The other right that we have. Most motions are adopted by a majority vote, and they are taken by a voice vote. And then there is a rising vote. And this is the motion you use when there needs to be a two-thirds vote for adoption, such as adopting the previous question or suspending a rule, or the motion for extending time for debate. And this means that when you have a rise and vote, this means that the members will stand. The presiding officer will once again survey the room and looks to see whether or not there are 2/3 standing in affirmative or 2/3 standing in opposition and if it looks inconclusive, then the presiding officer may ask for a counted vote. And in your small groups, instead of rising, you may have an alternative method where you use a show of hands. And the other method of voting is by ballot when you want secrecy. And oftentimes in your bylaws, it will prescribe those occasions when you have to have a ballot vote, which is generally in your section around your election of officers. But in some cases, even though it's not required to have a ballot vote, the body may think you're going to get a better sense or feel for what members' sentiments are, so they may ask to have a ballot vote. And the assembly can order a ballot vote by having a motion to do that, and it takes a majority vote for that to be adopted. So there are 3 types of voting requirements. We just talked about how you vote, but what are the voting requirements? And it depends upon the type of motion that you're going to vote on. But before we go over that, let's determine what a majority vote is. In Roberts, a majority means more than half of votes cast by those entitled to vote. Votes cast, that excludes blanks and abstentions. So now you may have heard 50% plus 1, and there truly is a difference. Let's take, and especially if it's a small group or a small number. Let's take, for example, there are 17 votes cast. Half of that is 8.5. So more than half would be 9. But if you said 50% plus 1, then you get 8.5 plus 1, which gives you 9.5. So now it takes 10 votes for that motion to be adopted. So Robert says more than half. Now, some organizations put 50% plus 1 in their documents, but thank goodness you do not. So let's look at a majority vote. Now, it's the most basic motion, vote for adoption of a motion, and usually these are the motions that don't restrict the rights of a member or an assembly. For instance, the motion to amend something is a majority vote. The next vote requirement, didn't intend to do that, but that's okay. The next vote requirement is a 2/3 vote, and that means 2/3 of the votes cast by those people entitled to vote. And this is the vote usually when you are going to restrict the rights. Did I hear someone? Okay, so the 2/3 vote is when we're going to restrict or limit something like the motion to suspend the rules or the motion to amend something that was previously adopted. And then there's the majority of the entire membership. And this means a majority of every member, the total number of members on your voting roll, whether they are present or not. So it's generally not used, especially in your large organization, because it's very difficult to attain. And I clicked a little earlier, so you see previous notice right there. And with previous notice, some of your motions require previous notice. And that is the requirement for some motions that notice of the intent to introduce a proposal or a motion must be given at your previous meeting or in the call for the current meeting. And a great example is in your bylaws, Article 12, and it reads, these bylaws may be amended by a 2/3 vote of those present and voting at any triennial meeting, provided written notice has been given to all delegates at least 90 days prior to the triennial meeting. And that is exactly what Roberts says. In Robert's Rules of Order, previous notice and a 2/3 vote is required to amend your bylaws. So I mentioned we were going to talk, and I know I'm moving fast, but I mentioned we were going to talk about rules of debate. And we've talked about how you make a motion. We've talked about your voting guidelines, but what rules do you follow when you're trying to debate the merits of your motion so that you have, every member has a right to participate and you get that diversity of thought so you can make some rational decisions. So the first thing to think about is that your members must obtain the floor before speaking by saying, Madam President or Madam Chair, and she'll respond with, Member A is recognized, or simply member. Then the maker of the motion has the privilege of speaking first. Now, each member may speak twice in debate, but may speak a second time only after those who wish to speak the first time have been given an opportunity to do so. And debate is confined to the merits of the motion. So have you ever heard anybody obtain the floor and say, well, I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but, well, if that comment is not germane to the motion, meaning it doesn't have a direct impact on the motion at hand, then it is not the right time. It can be addressed later under new business. Amendments are made to improve a motion, and amendments have to be approved by the body. It's a two-step process. You have to approve the amendment that you want to change the words, and then approve it or reject it. And then if it's approved, you still have to vote on the motion as amended. The motion to amend must be adopted first, and then the original motion as amended must be adopted. And then debate on a motion is closed by a 2/3 vote of the assembly. A member can call for the previous question, which is the motion to close debate, which would stop debate immediately, but that is a motion that has to be put to a vote. And it requires a 2/3 vote. And if the members, and you have to be, you don't interrupt, you have to be recognized to make the motion for the previous question. And if that motion is approved by a 2/3 vote, then you stop debate on the motion at hand, or the pending motion on the floor, and you go straight to the vote. But if you don't get that 2/3, that means the membership decided that they really wanted to continue voting. And the other way debate is closed is, when nobody else is trying to seek floor for recognition, but the previous question is used when it's just kind of going on and people are ready to move forward. And while you're doing those debate and you're thinking about those motions, you look at decorum, some general rules when you're taking care of your business. You need to confine your remarks to the pending question. And we just talked about they need to be germane. You need to address your remarks through the chair, meaning there's no crosstalk. Members don't talk to each other. They talk through the chair, Madam President, and the president will respond or refer it to someone else. You avoid using members' names. And so Roberts is a little formal in that way, but we're trying to make sure that people have a nice meeting experience. And so you may say something like the treasurer or the member who last spoke. And then you want to refrain, meaning do not speak against your own motion. You can decide to vote against it, but you cannot speak against it. You can just be quiet during debate. You need to refrain from reading reports or quotes or whatever. You can't just bring in a letter and decide you want to read it unless you get permission from the membership to do that. You want to refrain from disturbing the assembly during your meeting, meaning you're not going to walk around and make noise and that sort of thing. And then one last thing about decorum is that if you are speaking and you are interrupted by the presiding officer for some reason, maybe she needs to make a ruling or whatever, you should be seated until the presiding officer completes her comments. So can I have a couple of volunteers? Because once again, practice is good to speak on addressing your remarks through the chair. I need 2 volunteers, a president and member A.
I'll do member A.
Great. President?
Sure, I'd be president.
Wonderful. Let's go, member A.
Madam President,
Member A is recognized.
I have a request for information.
The member will state her question.
Tickets for the friendship event are $80. Will the membership chairman tell us about event expenses?
Chairman Williams.
So in this example, the member asked for some of the treasurer to speak, but the president could have just responded because she knew the answer, or could have related on to the other person. So I'm going to mention just briefly, when you make your amendments, they are to change words, and you amend by inserting words in the middle of the motion or adding words to the end of the motion. You can strike out words from your motion, or you can strike out and insert. And you make these motions to improve your motion in some way to make it more agreeable to the assembly. And in addition to your word changes, you can substitute, meaning strike out your whole paragraph. And that works like striking out an insert by substituting. So amendments are made in the debate portion of your motion process. So here's an example, and let's look at it. There's a main motion from our practice script, and it's a motion that I move to purchase a new computer for the treasurer with funds coming from the technology line item. And so during debate, a member wants to specify the type of computer. So she uses the form to strike out and insert words and says, I move to amend by striking out new computer and inserting HP laptop. So when making a motion, you need to say exactly what words you want to change. And that's so that the presiding officer can speak to specifically what was said, and everyone knows what the motion is. And if it's a complex motion, she may ask for it in writing. So when the amendment is voted on, remember, we only vote to adopt or reject the amendment. The vote does not change the main motion unless the motion on the amendment was adopted. It's a 2-step process. So here you would, if that motion was adopted by a majority vote, the main motion as amended, because you'd have to go back to it, is I move to purchase a HP laptop for the treasurer with funds coming from the technology line item. So we had that 2-step process there. Now, we've discussed quite a few parliamentary items, but before we put it all together and discuss what happens in a meeting, let's take a 4.5-minute break so you can stand up and get your blood circulating for a couple of seconds.
And if you have any questions, please put them on the chat line while you're taking this little break, so we can address the questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, I think that is about 4 minutes or so, and we just have a few more slides so that I can get through. I know it's a lot of content, so I just want to say welcome back. We want to do talk a few minutes about what it takes to plan and execute your business meeting, some good meeting tips. So the first thing is your minutes. You need to review and analyze the minutes of the past meetings. They reveal actions taken at your previous meeting and items that may have been referred to a committee or items postponed or made special orders. And then you want to think about your quorum, and that is the minimum number of members who must be present to legitimately conduct business. Otherwise, any actions taken are null and void. And any actions taken without a quorum may be ratified at the next meeting, but that does have a quorum, but the assembly does not have to do that. Then the third thing we want to think about is your agenda. The presiding officer, the president, chairman, sets the agenda, and it sets out the business that is going to be handled at this particular meeting. And once the agenda is approved, it can be modified, but that must have to happen with a 2/3 vote. So let's look at the agenda for a second. Robert's Rule of Order actually has what they call a standard order of business that's shown here by the acronym Mrs. Sun, because we love acronyms. But it does not include those opening things like a pledge of allegiance or invocation or prayer or any kind of other opening ceremonies. It discusses the business. And the first thing here is M. And M relates to minutes. The minutes need to be approved, and the chair will say, the secretary will read the minutes, or maybe the minutes were previously distributed, and then she will ask for any corrections if they were not previously approved by maybe a minutes approval committee. Then you've got your reports of your officers and standing committees, and they are presented in the order in which they are listed in your bylaws. You've got your report of your special committees, which are reported in the order of that special committee being established or appointed. You've got special orders, and these are actions that must happen at a particular time or on a particular meeting, such as your elections. Maybe your documents say elections must happen in November, so that's a special order. Then we've got unfinished business, which is business that was carried over from your last meeting. Unfinished business is not placed on the on your agenda if nothing was pending from your previous meeting, or if nothing was postponed from the previous meeting to this meeting. And then finally, you have your new business, and this is where members introduce any new business, make any new motions to come before the body. And then after your new business and your order of business, you can have your announcements and any kind of closing ceremonies, and the meeting is adjourned. And you do not need a motion to adjourn a meeting if you have exhausted your agenda. So continuing on with what happens in a meeting, there's the concept of germaneness, and we kind of talked about that a few minutes ago. Then you can change your mind. What if you want to change something that happened at a previous meeting or change something earlier in this meeting? So there are two motions. There's the motion to reconsider, or there's the motion to rescind or amend something previously adopted. Those are called your bring back motions, and that's a whole different parliamentary procedure meeting. So we're not going to discuss those. And then there's the stand at ease. Instead of a recess, you can ask the presiding officer can ask the members to stand at ease, meaning sit in your chair while I deliberate or I confer with maybe the parliamentarian or the treasurer or another member. And so you sit there and speak quietly, but you don't recess. Recess is a motion that would have to be made by the body. The president cannot order a recess. So that would be the difference. The president can order stand at ease as long as no one objects to that, or a member can ask for a recess. And then the final topic I want to bring is the motion on, is to mention your electronic meetings. Since COVID, a lot of organizations are increasingly having electronic meetings instead of your face-to-face meetings. And in Roberts, according to Roberts, the business of an organization can be validly transacted only at regular or properly called meetings with members gathered in one room or area for simultaneous oral, not oral, oral communication among all participants where you have a quorum present. And oral, we're not talking oral, we're talking oral, which has to do with hearing. So organizations need to have in their bylaws that they can validly have an electronic meeting. It must be authorized in your bylaws, and of course yours do. So regardless of the technology that you use for your electronic meetings, members must have an opportunity for simultaneous communication so that members can exercise those 4 rights that we talked about earlier: the right to attend meetings, make motions, speak and debate, and to vote. And with that, we have covered quite a bit of content in these last few minutes. Are there any questions?
Yes, we have on here from Valerie Lewis. Would you be sending a recording of this?
And it's my understanding that technology has recorded this.
Okay. Will the slides will be shared with persons attending?
No, the slides will not be shared.
Okay. Is there a place that they can get a full list of virtual classes?
Now that's for the virtual event committee.
Okay. All right, Susan Holland wants to know president and voting. Does the president vote last or separately since a tiebreaker? Can bylaws state that the president is only a tiebreaker?
So an organization can put whatever they choose to in their bylaws as long as they are approved. You know, that bylaw would have to be approved. Typically, the president might vote last, but so that she can decide whether she wants to affect the outcome of the vote.
Okay. Barbara Carver wants to know when the secretary or one taking minutes requires a clarification of wording of a motion made, does this person address the president as does any other member in line, the same as any other member participating in this action?
So if I heard that correctly, if the president or if another member wants it clarified, they can ask for a request for information and have that clarified. Or if it's a complicated motion, the president may ask for it to be in writing so that everybody understands what the motions are that are being made. But absolutely, we want to have it restated if necessary so that everybody knows what's being voted on.
Okay, in membership and voting, can bylaws state a subset of members who can vote?
There can be classes of membership, some with and without voting privileges, but that needs to be in your bylaws.
All right. When changes to the national bylaws become available, is it then the responsibility of the province bylaws committee to update the province bylaws?
So, because you say the province bylaws, once those bylaws are adopted at whatever meeting they're adopted at, whether that's your triennium or whatever, once they are adopted, they go into effect immediately. So whether they get written down somewhere, it takes people longer than a minute to get it written and distributed out, it is effective immediately unless there is a proviso attached that says this will take effect, 3 months from now or in January after such and such happens, but they become effective immediately.
Okay. If someone requests that their abstention be recorded, is that put in the minutes?
Abstentions are not recorded.
Okay.
Cherise,
Is there a section in Robert Rules regarding electronic meetings?
Yes, there is actually a whole section at the back of the book that addresses electronic meetings. I've heard President Boltner.
yes, I wanted to clarify. So when the National ECW makes a bylaws change, that goes into effect when we take our vote that yes, this is our bylaws change. Each of the provinces have their own bylaws. So in order for them to fall into accordance with the national bylaws, then they would have to take action on their own bylaws. Is that correct?
Thank you for clarification of that and how the organization actually works through its procedures.
So that is right, that then the province has to.
When you look at your hierarchy of things, if the hierarchy is the national board, then those things that they say needs to flow into what the provinces say, because the province cannot be in conflict with the higher level authority. So they do need to make that change in addition to any things that they have relative unique to their province.
Thank you.
Are you available to revive bylaws revisions? Cherise, are you available?
That is part of the parliamentary procedure services that I offer as a professional registered parliamentarian.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Cherise, do you want to share or stop sharing your screen now?
Well, I just want to say it has been my pleasure to bring this parliamentary procedure workshop to you as part of the National Episcopal Church Women's virtual event series. I hope you gleaned a bit of information that can help you have great meetings. I want to thank President Boltner and the committee for offering me this opportunity